Welcome the Board of Selectmen, Conservation Commission, Planning Board, all the people who contribute to running Norfolk's business and helping us create this park, and Historical Commission members and CPC and everybody. This is a great day for all of us because we've been all working so hard to make this park a reality, and it's been about 4 years just since the sign went up, right? Even though this is the official unveiling of the sign. Anybody wants a copy? A lot of work was done by Ms. Bartholomew. Yes. Yay! Barbara made this whole thing happen.
That's a whole team.
She did all the historical research, Walpole Historical Commission, Historical Society, and I'm not going to tell too much history because I'm going to let others do that, but just welcome everybody, and thanks so much for coming out because you could have stayed home and just watched something boring on TV, and this is way better.
I'm very happy to see that all of you took a little time out of your busy schedule on the weekend to join us today. We're here at the base of what will become the Silas Fales Trail, and it will be the entry point to the to the Fales Park. The very land we stand on, belonged to Silas Fales. It was part of the whole, and when the railroad came through in 1849, and Silas sold them the right-of-way through his land, it left these two little pieces, this one and the one across the street. And they're kind of little triangular leftovers. And that basically, so we are standing on Fales land at the present time. The money that Silas received in payment for the right-of-way that he granted to the Norfolk County Railroad was expended in building that beautiful house that we now see on the other side of the bridge. That house was built in 1850 with the railroad funds by Silas Fales and his sons. And most recently, the Nichols family occupied it for almost 40 years. And after Mr. Nichols passed away, the family sold the property. And a young man by the name of Matthew Award bought it about, 18, 20 months ago. And he set to work restoring it. And he has done a fantastic job. Yeah. It is a beautiful historic piece.
Is he here?
Now that has to be preserved for many more years to come.
Thank you.
All right, Bertha Fales moved from Norfolk in the 1940s, or before the 1935, excuse me. And she moved out to East Douglas. And as she advanced in years, she was left with small parcels of land that families still owned here. And in 1943, she took a fall and was seriously injured and incapacitated. And she made a decision that she needed to liquidate the remaining land. The family owned about 13.5 acres of land here in Norfolk. And the land actually was situated on the other side of Campbell Street, north of the filter plant. And it comprised 4 different parcels that were abutting each other that the family had accumulated. So in 1943, she had given up living in East Douglas and come back and taken up residence in a home in Rentham. And she approached the selectmen of the town of Norfolk and asked them, told them that she would like to donate the land to the town for a park in memory of her family. And in the spring town meeting in 1943, Article 9 on the town warrant was the proposal to the town voters that Bertha wished to donate 13.5 acres of land to the town of Norfolk to establish the Fales Memorial Park. The town meeting that spring unanimously accepted her generous donation. And then, somehow, the park never happened. And basically the story goes like this. Around the 1960s, it seems, when Helen Cleary was our selectman, Helen was doing a study of bylaws, and she was going through all the old records and town warrants and to accumulate or codify the bylaws that the towns had passed. And she came across this Article 9 on the town warrant in 1943. So she became curious, where was Fales Park? So she and Ken Woods, who was then on the Young Conservation Committee, teamed up to see if they could unravel the mystery and find this land that was given for a park. And they came pretty close. They found the general location, but they were unable to complete the process because no one could produce the deed. And it was a great mystery. Where did the deed to the land go? But no one could find it. And then basically there was a change. Helen went off the Board of Selectmen, Ken Wood retired, and the issue sort of was left in limbo. And about 8 or 9 years ago, I was ferreting through some old files at the historic office, and I came across this folio of Helen Cleary's work, and I found the little clipping, Article 9, from the 43 town meeting. So I too wanted to know, where did the land for Fales Park go, and why don't we have a Fales Park? 18 months later, I had finally unraveled the mystery. All right? And the mystery was quite simple. I was over in the landmark engineering office, and Mr. Cutler gave me free rein to go through their drawings, and also then when I had finished and had found a plan for this land, he said, well, there's also a file there's a folder in the file that the surveyor put together. So he pointed me in the direction of the file and the drawer, and he said, it's somewhere in there. So 2 hours later, I came out with this big fat folder, and it was all the work of the surveyor who had laid out the town forest. And mixed in with all those documents, I found a photostatic copy of the deed, handwritten by Bertha Fales herself, and also an accompanying letter that she wrote to the selectmen explaining the history of the land she was giving them. So we're off and running. So now I pursued it further. Well, if that's where the land, where's the town forest? Well, much to my dismay, I discovered that in 1980, the Army Corps of Engineers was assembling land to create the Charles River Natural Valley Storage Area. And the town forest, the Norfolk Town Forest, was one of the pieces of property along the Stop River that they wanted and took. And so by eminent domain in 1980, it became the property of the United States government. So the land that Bertha had given to the town of Norfolk now belonged to the United States government. So not to give up, I said, well, if we can't have it there, where else can we have it? And as luck would have it, CPC, to whom we are greatly indebted, was willing to fund the purchase of the Highland Lake property and was in the process of doing so. So the Historic Commission petitioned the CPC as to whether they would be amenable to our asking that part of the land of Highland Lake be designated for the Fales Park. And we too went to town meeting, and in the spring of 2009, on the town meeting, Article 55 made the proposal that 13.5 acres of this property be designated the Fales Memorial Park. And the town again unanimously approved. So we stand here today, and we are now officially opening the Fales Memorial Park. We've yet to finish the trails. We have the layout, and we hope to finish the picnic area. There's still a lot of amenities left to be done, but the park has become a reality. And I'd like at this time to call upon Cindy Andrade to speak a few words about the role of the CPC.
Thank you. Thank you for everything. CPC. The Community Preservation Commission administers the Community Preservation Act in town. We collect monies from the state and from the town, and we can use it for historic purposes, open space, and recreation, and affordable housing. So with the two projects really here about the purchase of Highland Lake and the reestablishment of the Fales Memorial Park, we've managed to hit two of those objectives, both the historic and the open space and recreation. So it really was a win-win for the town. Ultimately, though, and I know Betsy already gave all the kudos to Barbara. Without Barbara, this would not have been a reality, I don't think. Not for a very long time, anyway. So for all the work that she's done here to make this a reality, we thank her very much. And you should also know that there's another entrance on Main Street that she's been working on with easier parking. And we're looking forward to the trail system being in place. And I just wanted to mention also that when I moved into town, which was 30-ish years ago, I was fortunate enough to get a book that was on sale at the library called Early Norfolk Revisited. And that's what I browsed through and learned a little bit about the history of the town. But now we have panels. And you can go and you can stand here, you can stand downtown Hill, over at City Mills Pond, and really get a visual interpretation of what things were like before we were all here. So, and that's also Barbara's doing and the Historical Commission, and I just wanted to thank them very much. And CPC looks forward to more great projects with the help of the town.
She puts ideas in my head. She said parking. You realize, of course, that piece of land over there belongs to the town of Norfolk?
Uh-huh.
It looks a little puddly, though.
Well, along the edges, we might be able to create some parking, pull-off parking. All right, now I'd like to move on, and I'd like to ask Scott Bugbee, the chairman of our selectmen, to say a few words.
Thank you, Barbara. I want to thank Norfolk Historical Society, CPC, and obviously the town residents for approving this project. We couldn't have done it without everyone's approval and their help. I want to thank my fellow selectmen, Jim and Jeff, for being here today, and thank you for having me. I don't want to keep you guys, Barbara. Wonderful work. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
I've got to check my notes to make sure I haven't missed anyone.
Just a few words.
Yeah. All right, now I'd like to turn to my co-partner in crime. Charles, this is Charles Hardy from the Walpole Historical.
Right here.
And the project, I neglected to say at the time, but we are standing on Walpole land. And until 1870, when we became the town of Norfolk, this area was part, up to the Stop River, was part of Walpole. So when we set to work on the project and on the panel, it was a partnership between Norfolk and Walpole. And Charlie is my partner in crime because he and John Anderson, who was unable to be with us today, are responsible for many of the completed parts of that panel.
And for surveying the land.
The survey, the sketch, and then, of course, his wife Sue and Roger Turner, who is also not present today. The two of them helped us out in terms of enhancing those old photos, some of which were 150 years old, so that we could reproduce them on the panel. And so therefore, as I say, the project was a cooperative effort between the two. So Charlie will explain to you their role in the park.
Okay, well, I knew Barbara was going to talk about the history of the park, so I thought I'd hit more of a personal note on this, if you don't mind. For Barbara and me, this has been a long journey of discovery. Going back about 10 years ago, when I was researching Powder House Hill in Walpole, that's where Squire Miller Fales built his retirement mansion on the top of that hill. Since then, it's been torn down, of course. But I was looking into that, and at the same time, Barbara had discovered Bertha Fales' book, The History of Norfolk, which impressed her mightily. And so it was Thelma Ravinsky who brought us together. She said, why don't you call Barbara Bartholomew? And of course, this was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Barbara and I, both history teachers, we just extremely compatible, you know. So bit by bit, we began to uncover the saga of the Fales family in Walpole and North Rentham. Of course, I had no idea that Barbara had email back then. So we wrote letters to each other, big long letters, filled with sketch maps and dates and questions. I couldn't wait to get to the mailbox. I didn't know what surprise Barbara would have for me, you know?
We're gonna publish that someday, I can't be long. I have two three-ring binders, about 2 inches thick, filled with all this correspondence.
Yeah. So after figuring out the beginnings of the Stop River enterprises here, I had to admit to Barbara that Bertha Fales was indeed a great historian, because I was skeptical at first. Even though she spent most of her life listening to what old folks told her about the past, and the end of her life sitting at the kitchen table with the kerosene lamp writing the history of Norfolk, she seemed like kind of an unlikely historian, but everything that she wrote, we validated. And when we found out that Bertha was a follower of the Swedish mystic Emanuel Swedenborg, that really made sense to me. To follow Emanuel Swedenborg, you have to be able to think outside the box and to stretch the limits of the traditions that you were brought up with, because he was a free thinker, you know, very progressive in many ways. Actually, to find this out about Bertha, I would expect nothing less. And of course, it gave her a perspective with which to look at the history of her hometown. So we validated all of Bertha's statements, and I concluded that that wisp of a gentle lady was indeed a first-rate thinker. Barbara was way ahead of me in that judgment. So one day I was poking around up here, and I ran into Mr. Nichols, who was standing in the driveway over there. He lived in the old Silas Fale house. And I asked him about the furnace, which he knew about, and he said, "You can find slag at the foot of the cliff over there." I said, "Really?" You know, so I came over here, poked through the leaves, and sure enough, there were the pieces of slag. We showed them to a geologist, and he told us that there were signs of vitrification, and, you know, where the rock had turned to glass, and you could see the flowage of the limestone. And the cyanic coloring, which are all telltale signs of very high temperatures achieved only in a blast furnace. So we had the proof that we needed that the furnace was here. Of course, nothing was left of the furnace because the railroad was right directly in the path of the furnace, so it was obliterated. So Barbara and I got pretty bold one day when we decided that this little section of Norfolk needed a decent name. You know, it was called Highland Park and, Highland Lake and different names. So we knocked it around a little bit and we came up with Stop River Falls. And our thinking on that is in that booklet that we put together, The Settlement at Stop River Falls. It has an orange cover. What we hope is that that name will stick for this part of Norfolk. We'll see, you know. So meanwhile, I have become a big fan of Squire Miller Fales. He deserves our attention for what he accomplished back in the 1820s. I mean, his life story is filled with pathos. He had his ups, his downs, his tragedies, you know, and the story is worth retelling. I think the people of Norfolk and Walpole can be proud that he's one of us. And as far as the Fales clan goes, we hope that this public park will shed light on the accomplishments of that famous family, which contributed so much to this region. It was really one of America's first families. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Very nice, Charlie.
Can I ask one question? Squire Fales, is that Silas Fales himself or his father, or
No,
are they related?
No, this is before.
This is earlier. But is it the same family?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
But
Let me
this
get-
Silas Fales that's pointed on this picture, I'm always pointing to these two pictures. I love this picture of Silas because he was one of our very first selectmen in Norfolk.
That's Silas E., that's the son.
Everett.
That's the son of,
The father
Everett.
built the house, that's the son, who was
okay.
our town
And
clerk.
he's standing here handsomely in his Civil War uniform.
And the squire that he speaks of is Silas in the house, his nephew.
Oh,
It's
okay,
his brother's son.
okay. Barbara's a walking encyclopedia.
That's what I call her.
Now, I had expected a delegation from the Fales family to be with us this afternoon, but evidently they had some type of...
Oh,
They're here.
that's right.
Hey, well, we're glad you came.
This is Michael Fales from Franklin and his two daughters. Perfect.
These are your relatives on this.
I know. I'm learning an awful
Well,
lot.
the Fales family that populated Norfolk, basically, this line of the family died out. The last living member of the family was Bertha. And so when Bertha passed away in 1950, that branch of the family ended. He did have brothers who lived in the Milford area, but we've not been able to trace them. But we know that Michael and his family are descendants of the James Fales of Walpole, from which all of this Fales clan descended. So in that way, and you must be, I don't know, 11th, 12th generation? At least.
You would probably know better.
Well, I believe, looking through the Fales genealogy down at the Walpole Historical, I would guess that your children are probably 12th generation, and you were probably 11th generation. And Bertha herself was 8th generation. And you figure she died in 1950, so 2 generations after that would make you at least 10, but I would guess probably 12, somewhere around 11
We
or
encourage
12.
you to read the various publications we've put together.
Well, I brought with me the settlement.
The
I don't have
settlement.
copies of the settlement, but they're obtainable from either the Walpole Historical Society or the Norfolk Commission. But last week, the Walpole Society has recently purchased a stove that was made here at the foundry
75 years ago.
75 years ago. And the fellow out
1937.
in Portsmouth, Rhode Island, in Little Compton, Rhode Island, restored it. And it is gorgeous. And if you have the opportunity, you can visit the Walpole Historical on West Street. They're open every Saturday afternoon from 2 to 4. And the stove is on display. And Charlie and I are working on a video which will air sometime this summer on Norfolk Cable. And we will do the background of the stove, and then we have a beautiful video that NCTV did for me, and the fellow who restored the stove does a demo, and he shows the stove and how it works and all the utensils that go with it. So it's going to
It's
be
an amazing cooking stove. You know, it's full of doors, and
Yeah,
places you can, let
Brandon
flour
Pino.
rise, and where you can have a stew, on all day, and probably you can grill hot dogs on the hot part.
It's a place to make waffles.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's a
yeah.
waffle cooker.
Oh, yeah.
So last week, Charlie and I did a program at Walpole Society on the stove, the arrival of the stove for the membership down there. And John made out these pamphlets, and this pamphlet is just to put together things we've produced, and it contains what Charlie was referring to, the Walpole Foundry piece,
Yeah.
and it also, what else did he include?
Let's see, Walpole Foundry and,
The Ironworks.
Squire Miller
Squire.
as an industrialist.
And,
Yeah.
And he put them together. The cost is $3 if you're interested. I have about 8 copies if anyone wants one. But they will be available in the future as well. And this is interesting. And as I say, it has the pictures. There's a picture in the back of the stove, all reproduced. And the fact that it was patented by Fuller, and it was produced in 1837.
And it was made right up there.
It was made right on the other side of the
So,
bridge.
Yeah.
question please.
And then
How
there's
did
a
you find the
picture
stove?
of the stove as it was
eBay.
found
First found,
before
yeah.
he restored it, which is
How did you find the stove? How did you find the stove?
John Anderson found it on eBay.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And then they wanted a lot of money for it, and she said, we can't touch it, Although it did say, patented by Leonard Fuller, Walpole, Mass, right on the metal. But so that it dropped from the radar. Then John and his wife Sue were traveling someplace.
I thought John made the original contact because he had the iron pots down in the cellar that he wanted appraised.
Oh, maybe.
He contacted the stoveworks guy down in Little Compton as to whether he could give a value. Oh yeah, bring them down. And then when he got down there,
There's the
lo and
stove.
behold, there's the stove.
Yeah. Well, they were on an airplane when they were reading the magazine, the in-flight magazine, and there was an ad there
That's right.
out of the Yankee magazine that showed the restored stove. And
But it was our stove.
yeah.
They came from here. All right, now before we do the cutting ceremony, I would like to ask your little girl, since she's the youngest,
Yay!
to do the honors. I want to point out that up the top of the hill to the right, when you get up on the flat up there, that is where there's a grove area, dates back to the days of the railroad park, and we are going to designate that to be Bertha Fales Grove, and work it into create it as a picnic area. All right, and that there will be a sign, of course, Bertha Fales Grove, and at the bottom there'll be a notation. And the notation is going to be a quotation from that letter that Bertha wrote to the Selectmen when she asked them did they want the land, the origins of the land. And this is what it will say. I wish to pass on the woods for people to take lunches in the summer and to enjoy the birds who nest in it, unquote. And that was what she
awesome?
put at the
We have a
closing.
preserve.
So I think we are fulfilling her wish.
That is so
But this
great.
is a beautiful, and Mrs. Benton has filled me in on a great deal, that this is a fly path for the migratory birds. And therefore,
nice
if you
is
are a
that?
bird watcher,
Wonderful.
it's a beautiful place in
Yeah.
season to watch the birds traveling north and south. So,
It's official.
we are now the Fales Park. Oh, very, thank you very
Do you
much.
want to introduce some guests?
Yes, we have all kinds of guests
We
here.
have to introduce a few guests.
You want to start?
No, I can't think of anybody.
Well, we have Lynn Benton and her husband Ed from King Philip Trail. They have been immeasurable in their help to me and my work on Highland Lake. We've met the Cindy Andrade from the CPC. We have other two members of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Colombo and Mr. Leon. We have Mr. Crane, I think you all know Bill Crane, Mrs. Ritchie from King Philip Trail. What?
David LaPointe?
Yes, we have David LaPointe with us today. David bailed me out when when we first got this done. He was able to make a working drawing for me, make a copy of it, 2/3 this size, so we could use it for demonstrative purposes. And it was most helpful. And he also then made a beautiful one of the Town Hill panel, which essentially we intend to donate to the elementary school, so that the children there will be able to enjoy them. And let's see, what else have we got? We've got Mr. Diamond, who has an interest in the boxing. And I informed Mr. Diamond not too long ago, found a copy of Boston Globe, and John L. Sullivan did come here to Highland Lake, and he did an exhibition boxing match at the lake in 1883. So it wasn't just a legend, it was a reality.
So this park represents, as the sign says, 3 centuries of history. And a lot of the history here is more like ancient history of, this old foundry and the old industries, right?
Huh?
But in the next few months, we're going to open the other end of the Highland Lake Park, which celebrates Highland Lake Grove, which was a completely different story of this marvelous and famous amusement park that was here, that entertained children from Boston and dignitaries from all over. What? Oh, and even the President of the United
Had
States
breakfast at
had
Highland
breakfast
Lake
at
Grove.
Highland Lake Grove. So we're all very proud that we discovered that
It existed
Rutherford B. Hayes came here on the train.
It existed for about 25 years, from 1875 to the turn of the century. And I estimate conservatively that 250,000 people came to this park. And there were only about probably 1,500 people in Norfolk back then. And I think more realistically, the figure may be closer to 500,000.
Yeah.
We brought them by the trainload.
This was before the automobile. And before there were cars, the idea of coming out on the train, whoa, the train, to a place like Norfolk, a day in the country was just top of everyone's list. And then as soon as there were automobiles around, that was a pretty
May I
old-fashioned.
interject?
Yes.
There used to be a sign down at the railroad station, high, dry, and healthy. Welcome to Norfolk.
Welcome to Norfolk.
My sister-in-law, who lived to be over 101, remembers when she came to town.
That Norfolk was dry, but doesn't mean no alcohol.
No, it doesn't. It was a healthy, because Boston was so hot and everything.
Right.
Here we had the beautiful breezes.
People would come out here for their Saturday picnic. So do you know when we may be opening that park? Any estimate? We're not quite ready. We'll let you know. So thank you all very much for coming.
Good job.
And we're so happy to have you here. Thank you very much. Thank you. Great collaboration of a lot of different groups.
Did you find that information?
I did, I went through it, oh, yeah.
Isn't this incredible?
I walked this up when we were looking at the dams.
It looks like the national park. That's how good it is. So good. I know. Look at these two birds. Isn't that awesome? I love that. These have been, this one was a bird. We're so lucky. These two photos. I know. The more you love it. When we first saw this picture,
And there's nothing else down there.
29 years old, right? We thought, oh, what a funny little skinny old lady, right? And that was about it. And then, oh, she wrote this history. Wow. And then yes, right.
Yeah, I'm an old lady. Ashley.
So you got the sound and everything?